5th day of March 2023. Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. You can call me the Gamma Goat. Bah. And you can call in at 709-589-4406 if you have something to contribute. Don't be shy. We're not. Let me see where I'm to. What am I doing here? We're going to do a show on nuclear. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdowns and radioactive fallouts worldwide an extinction level event? So if you're not familiar with that, we'll explain that to you in a few minutes. There's a comparison of Chernobyl and a single reactor from Japan. By the way, Chernobyl never had reactor core fuel pools stored at the top of the buildings. As you can see, by the way, Fukushima was pure uranium plutonium. Chernobyl was real terrible, but it was just mostly graphite. Each reactor in Japan is 100 times the fuel of Chernobyl. You've been hoodwinked your entire life. Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, there's only stumps left. As compared to Chernobyl, it's a big difference, obviously. Oh my God, there's two. They built these fake covers off-site, brought it in. These are just panels and cross members, and they're trying to pretend that everything is normal. They got all the fuel out of a pool that actually doesn't even exist. So it's quite confusing if you're trying to work this out on your own. The International Atomic Energy Agency admitted there's no safe levels of man-made anthropogenic radioactive fallout, and that the standards are based on natural radiation, not man-made. And so you have to immediately disregard anything the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is just a corporation, a subsidy of another corporation known as the International Disaster UN. So children with 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. So you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So billion atoms makes up the head of a needle. So 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it, but each atom is capable of making you sick in increments over your lifetime. So if you start bioaccumulating, which is what they're talking about there, so imagine how vulnerable insects and birds and mammals are, and then you'll understand the poll tonight. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. The single atom is considered 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. 50 becquerels a kilogram in your food leads to irreversible lesions in adults, let alone children. It's incredibly destructive to children. In adults, it's brutal. It's permanent lesions, irreversible to the vital organs. And so just inhaling one hot particle, you can put 2 million particles on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. Just one can cause a cancer, but there's actually 1,800 illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies, injuries and illnesses. It's not just cancer. The industry's entire legacy is absurd, despicable. There's no such thing as a good pro-nuclear. They actually know what I'm showing you. They make it their job to poison you. I know that might be hard for some people to accept, but you better start accepting the reality. And I'm going to overwhelm you with documentation. It's completely unassailable. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. So that's the stump of reactor 3. At the top of the building, were 4 decades and 2 fuel pools, which you're talking about an absurd amount, were lost in 4 buildings. So there's 8 fuel pools. 4 and 4 is 8. Now, the radioactive fallout is described 2 ways. Germany done a model on the ocean. Let me play that for you real quick. This is based on 6 years, which is long past, okay?
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Okay, so you had the entire Pacific radiated in 6 years. Now, the problem with the story was that actually happened in the first couple of weeks. This is a model of the airborne radioactive fallout from France. Not that you should trust France, but there's many different models that back it up. This model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. So 16 days of radioactive fallout versus 6 years. So obviously after 16 days, the planet was completely buried in radioactive waste. So I launched research expeditions. Apparently the biggest crime in human history is going out and taking pictures of the coastline. I apologize to everybody that I offended, which turns out to be only the pro-nuclear community. And while I was doing the research, what I discovered, of course, it was rarely nice like that. This was a typical day of research. Brutal, cold, wet, miserable, and stalked by thousands of public relation firms. So here's what we discovered, and that the world has refused to acknowledge for some reason, that the species to the left are missing. They're actually exterminated. We can quantify that assertion because I went back year after year after year, which apparently makes me super evil, and counted the species. It wasn't very hard. You can count them on one hand. Instead of 7,000 plus highly visible species, I was met with, these are before and authentic pictures after, before and after, an extinction event. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. So birds, for instance, flying along the coastline, instead of being a smorgasbord of food to your left, it was completely naked, like your right. And these are authentic pictures. Now, I dove that coastline for years. I got thousands of hours on the ocean floor. Massive die-off reported in the Pacific Ocean. There is no fish out there anywhere. What's happening? Oh, it's pretty simple. It's called radioactive fallout. 100% death rates of baby seals. None survived. Abandoned by their mothers. Because think about seals live on the shoreline. Instead of being tons of food everywhere like to your left, it's now extinct like your right. Is it worth exterminating all those species to pretend nuclear is carbon free and all these other fables? LA Times, ongoing fish famine near the U.S. West Coast, the dearth of the food across the ocean. The species to your left are now exterminated. The West Coast bird die-off is the biggest ever recorded. I went out and documented it for 60 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. Doesn't that qualify as research? It's going out and taking pictures each year, providing the GPSs, challenging the nuclear degenerate industry. Now, to make it even worse, they're growing food billions of pounds a year for export, right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a no-go zone, in an exclusion zone. The International Atomic Energy Agency is the very devil, the very definition of the devil itself. The A-10 Warthog, your Atoms for Humanity, only shoots dirty bombs. Think about how stupid you gotta be to do something like that and to try to protect it. Think about it, and it's not stupid. They're actually very educated people, but they're evil on a different level. Evil on a level that's quantifies the word stupid. Only someone stupid would poison themselves. Don't expect your media to inform you. Don't expect your universities to inform you. They have been captured by the nuclear industry along with the regulatory agencies in increments over the last 80 years. It's a complete capture. You have no media to turn to, so I've created a media to educate those who are smart enough to be educated. I'm providing you with all the documentation so you can make informed decisions to protect yourself. Again, that's considered a crime against the nuclear industry. If you may read an article or listen to a lecture where they claim that man-made radiation is like a banana walking in sunshine, flying on an airplane, climbing a mountain, etc., 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 you're actually engaging with a disgusting parasite upon humanity, a despicable monster. Now, the problem with nuclear is not illegal to poison you. And there's an article came out a few years back about a protester, an ex-political candidate, who was going to plead guilty to seeking nuclear material, but he wouldn't get a prison sentence under the deal that he was offered. A noted Madison protester and former congressional candidate who was arrested last year after the FBI agent said he caught him trying to buy radioactive material online will plead guilty, but he won't serve any time after a deal. Now, the only reason he got a deal was that his lawyers filed a series of motions to dismiss the indictment against him, asserting that the nuclear terrorism charge under which he was charged is unconstitutional because Congress and parliaments don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radioactive substances. Do you know who got the authority? It's the non-regulatory agencies, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, which is obviously a non-regulatory agency, or this couldn't possibly happen. So he wouldn't get any jail because they didn't want the world to understand that Congress doesn't have the authority to criminalize poisoning because it's actually not illegal to poison you with radiation. Otherwise, they couldn't kill you and your loved ones in the hospitals with man-made radiation. And that's what they're doing. Radiation can't make you better. It wrecks all your other organs. Now, the last video we covered part of a nuclear meltdown abandoned community, 3% of it, was going to be open in Japan. The town is known as Nami, where they're actually harvesting food and encouraging people to move their children there so the nuclear industry can pretend that everything is hunky-dory. It's the lowest conceivable form of life, is everything about the nuclear industry. The radiation from Japan covered the entire planet. This model is based on 19.5 days. The French model I just showed you earlier was 16 days. Taiwan says There will be no wastewater in their water for 1.5 years, which is 13 and a half years after the whole planet was buried in radioactive fallout. You really don't have anybody in universities, anybody in the media or government to turn to worldwide. You actually don't have anybody to turn to with the facts. And they're going to put in a laboratory for tritium, they said, in Taiwan. Of course, Taiwan had 2,000 students, nuclear students, spam the internet for years after Fukushima melted down to lie to you and manipulate you and convince you that it was like a banana. Taiwan also, when they built their nuclear waste site, they done it on an island full of natives. They told the natives it was going to be a canning factory, and they built a nuclear waste site there. It's evil by nature. It doesn't know how to be good. It's not in their program to be a good person. They can't get a job and be a good person. They find the lowest forms of life with an education and they hire them. Okay, so we're going to go back through the time capsule and cover a bunch of headlines I have never covered, which is, I know, bizarre because we've been at this for over a decade. So it's pretty bizarre not to cover or to cover headlines we've never covered before, but that's exactly what we're doing. We have the 12th anniversary coming up next Sunday, and I thought I'd kick it off a little early this year with some rather interesting tidbits and facts and show you the propaganda so hopefully you won't fall for it. You won't become manipulated, and you will come up with ways to hold this industry accountable. The industry has not a single redeeming quality. There's not a single person in the nuclear industry, not a single person, and I mean it, there's not a single person in the nuclear industry that is actually human attributes. So NAMI, of course, I just showed you a headline that they're going to move people back to 3% of the community. This story is from 2018 in November. Residents of NAMI to sue TEPCO after government talks failed. Of course, a corporation is responsible for the nuclear meltdown instead of the nuclear industry. And here they're suing the government because the government is accepting responsibility when it's convenient. The lawyers said 100 people roughly from the town of Nami, which is abandoned, they're going to open up 3% of a nuclear wasteland at the end of the month. 3%. You can't make something 3% safe when it comes to a nuclear wasteland. Are expected to launch the suit, but the members will likely reach about 2,000 people. In the 5-year-long redress negotiations after 7 years, the government still refuses to give them anything for losing their community and their homes. In the 5-year-long, that's why you don't want nuclear on your planet. Another reason, I should say. TEPCO, which is a company designed to take the blame instead of where it should be directed, is the nuclear industry. Everybody in the nuclear industry should be held accountable, should be sued because of TEPCO. TEPCO kept turning down out-of-court deal proposals made by the Nuclear Damage Claim Dispute Resolution Center, a.k.a. The Distraction. Despite utilities' earlier promise to respect such proposals, this forced the center to discontinue the resolution process for 15,000 plus victims from NAMI alone. Over the period, about 850 petitioners, including elderly, passed away. So TEPCO's waiting for people to die so they don't have to pay them. That is the standard operation in the nuclear degenerate industries. The would-be plaintiffs will demand additional compensation for TEPCO for betraying the residents' expectations by repeatedly refusing to settle the disputes. TEPCO has rejected reconciliation proposals by citing irrational reasons. And in the suit, the residents will demand compensation, being forced to evacuate, having their community destroyed by endless radioactive fallout, and having their expectations for a settlement betrayed by the utility, which is being very polite. Everybody on TEPCO, executives, should have been publicly executed for what they done. They murdered countless. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, and cancer is just one of 1,800 diseases from radiation. Evacuation instructions have been lifted in NAMI, except in areas designated as zones where it will be difficult for the victims to return. You can't have radioactive zones in your community and have a community. And so that's 2018. Flash ahead to 2023. At the end of this month, they're going to open 3% of the community. So how safe is it? How safe is it? What remains of the radiated, damaged, and abandoned Japanese towns? Gallery of Nami. This is 2013. So Nami is a fairly big community, as you can see. I'm just going to show you pictures of this community where they're going to move people back. It's abandoned. It's abandoned and destroyed. And they want to move people back into this nuclear wasteland so they can pretend nuclear didn't hurt nobody, why the nuclear reactors are still ongoing and melting down. And why, in goodness sakes, would people be there in 2013 taking pictures, let alone see a couple of people by the truck? The whole story is absurd. So is nuclear worth abandoning all these communities? They're trying to move people back so they can say it's not abandoned, but it's a nuclear wasteland. That's permanent. You can't etch that out. You can't make that go away. Why would you want to move back to a nuclear wasteland? Remember, this is just 2 years later. Imagine how bad it is 12 years later. Why abandon all these shopping malls, all these apartment buildings, if nuclear, all these gas stations and vending machines, if nuclear had any redeeming qualities? Why are you abandoning? Do you think the people that owned all of these businesses will tell you nuclear is good? Because you're guaranteed that they're not going to. This is Nami. This is a nuclear wasteland on top of that. Japan betrayed the citizens over radiation dangers. So Japan officials checked for radiation on children after the March 2011 disaster. Like, you can't quantify how much they breathed in, for starters, doing that. It's only going to pick up gamma. The people that are working it are wearing paper suits on top of this, so it's obviously they're not academics. And that the equipment they're using, if it gets a big dose, it no longer works. And how can you not get a big dose in a nuclear wasteland? It's completely ineffective what they're doing. And they're trying to say, no, you're okay, next. No, you're okay, next. Because they don't even know what they're doing. The farmers were given the worst Geiger counters imaginable and told to check the food themselves, and that if it was over 500 becquerels a kilogram, to mix it with food that wasn't so radioactive before they shipped it. Farmers, the very last people that should have been there. They should have been arrested for growing food in a nuclear wasteland. Japan has been accused of betraying its own people by giving American military the information of the radioactive fallout from their Speedy system, which done over 5,000 models in the first week, more than a week before it told the Japanese public. It's not a betrayal, it's murder. It's genocide, right? The mayor of a Japanese community abandoned because of his proximity to the multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns said the government's actions are akin to murder. Yeah, they're not akin, it is murder. But it doesn't happen overnight typically. But it happens nevertheless. They didn't move them out of the nuclear wasteland. They'd done everything they could not to move them out. They were telling people to shelter in the place because the plume coming through was lethal doses. 3,000 people died in the first month. They blamed it on stress from having to evacuate. But millions and millions of people evacuate all the time for hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones. We've never seen thousands of people drop dead. The industry, the entire planet should be gone to war against the nuclear industry every day. If you want to have an insect in the next 20 years, you better get to war against this industry. In the hours after the meltdown at Fukushima, unseen plumes of radioactive isotopes began to roll over the Japanese landscape. Let me show you another model of the radioactive fallout. Because apparently it's really difficult to understand something stupid and simple. I'll do the best I can. I'm only talking to the nuclear industry, of course. This is a Neptunium-239 dispersal. It decays after 22 days to plutonium-239, which is named after the devil. Covers the entire planet in just a couple of weeks. So when you talk about a plume or a unseen plume of radiation to roll over the Japanese landscape, when it covers the entire planet in a quicker time than they're talking about. No information coming from Tokyo. The mayor decided to lead the people of the community further north away from the plant. He did not know it at the time, but that was the very direction of the plume the radiation was also blowing. We had no information. We were unwittingly evacuating to an area where the radiation level was highest. We were unwittingly evacuating to an area where radiation levels were high. So I was worried about the people's health, and I feel the pain in my heart, but also rage over the poor action of the government. And while the people of Nami, which we talked about quite a bit in this last week, and the Japanese public as a whole were not getting any clear idea whatsoever from any government worldwide, let alone the Japanese, about the possible spread of the radiation, the Americans, just 3 days after, Japan's science minister handed over computer predictions about radiation dispersal to the U.S. military-industrial complex. The government done that to secure U.S. support in dealing with the nuclear crisis. The science minister should have told the Nuclear Disaster Task Force to pass the data on to the people, but the geniuses didn't think of warning the people. Imagine that statement. Well, we didn't pass it on to the people because we didn't think of it. The system was created and funded and legalized by the people so they can be warned, not the US military. It was created by the people so that if they had an accident, the models could tell the people where to avoid or where to go. And they're saying we didn't think of giving it to the people from the very system that was created to warn the people in the first place. Shouldn't that person be publicly executed? He admits that maybe the same data should have been shared with the public. But we didn't think of it. How could you not think of it? Why did you look at it? Data should have been shared with the public. And I should have. It was supposed to. It was legally binding. How can you let them get away with it? How can you not hold them accountable? How can you not call for them to be strung up by their necks? How does that actually work? How can you say you're a human? I'm talking to the people that done it. How can you claim you're a human? How does that actually work? Science Ministry should have told the Nuclear Disaster Task Force to pass the data. The Nuclear Disaster Task Force. If you can't, for a split second, trust any of the government entities, how can you call it a society? How does that even work? How can you not know right from wrong? If someone stupid like me can know the difference, how can you smart people not know? According to the government panel investigating the disaster, the information about the potential spread of radiation could have been given to the public. Not could have, it was supposed to be given to the public. How could you not give it to the public is the question. And who the fuck are you? And why ain't you swinging by a rope somewhere? Because you should be. And if you had any children since that, they should be swinging from a rope too, to make sure your gene pool doesn't live on. Who is now homeless, Mr. Baba was the mayor of Nami, accused the disgusting, despicable, revolting Japanese authorities of abandoning his village by withholding information and leaving the community at the mercy of the radioactive fallout. It's not nice language. Neither is murder that they committed against the entire planet. But I still think it was an act of murder. What were they thinking when it came to people's lives? I doubt they even thought about our existence. And you know what? They didn't. They thought about how can they get rid of you. You know, they had the records of all of this. They decided to throw it away because they couldn't find a place to store it. But they found 115,000 items for the museum built a few miles away that cost $50 million in Okuma or Fukushima, within sight of the nuclear meltdown. They went around and got 160,000 items stored there, but they couldn't find a spot for the records. A little pissed tonight because I'm reminded constantly of how evil this planet is. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdown and radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? But of course it is. If you go back and watch the beginning of the building, I showed you the evidence from the research expeditions. Japan delayed the release of radiation details, 17th of January 2012. Testifying in front of the disgusting Japan Nuclear Investigation Panel, the scumbag Science Ministry official, they should name him there, revealed data about the spread of radiation was provided to the U.S. militaries 3 days after the ongoing multiple. And they used earthquake and tsunami. The radiation wasn't from a tsunami and earthquake, it was from nuclear meltdowns. They got to say those words. Oh, it was the earthquake and tsunami that triggered it. It doesn't matter what triggered it. It matters that it happened. But every single story will do that routine. It's not a nuclear crisis. It's an extinction level event. 9 days before the Japanese public was officially informed, it is feared the delay in providing the public with the same data had resulted in unnecessary radiation exposures, not of thousands, but millions and millions and millions, around 100 million Japanese victims, not to mention the Northern Hemisphere. That model there is 19.5 days later, 468 hours, the entire planet covered in radioactive fallout. Report finds mistakes in Fukushima response. This is 2011. Now remember, I haven't covered any of these stories before. This is the first time I covered the majority of these stories. A report has found a lack of preparation, poor communication at all levels after the disaster struck were among the failures that turned a nuclear accident from Japan, nuclear Fukushima plant, into the worst atomic crisis in 25 years. Again, doing everything they can not to tell the story. Framing it as if, again, they claim Chernobyl is somehow worse than multiple fuel pools and reactor cores melting down in Japan. I can barely contain my contempt. The report also noted that monsters, demonic demons, the cover story to hide the nuclear industry for what it's done, TEPCO, did not have enough expertise on the ground. Well, where the frig was the International Atomic Energy scumbags to? Saying made mistakes like misunderstanding the functioning status of the number 1 reactor's cooling system and mishandling the number 3 reactor core cooling system. Well, that stump that remains there is reactor 3. What? They're just lying. There was no way to stop it. Tsunami sucked out 480 kilometers of the coastline and made a 2,000 square mile of debris in the Pacific Ocean. Nuclear reactor closed to leaking water. They show you the stack from Fukushima, by the way. Then they show you pictures as if that's the one they're talking about, which is not. They're talking about another reactor. In Western Japan, shut down one of the reactors because of leaking radioactive water. At the Mahama nuclear plant means just 8 of the country's 54 reactors are online. So each of these reactor sites are, say, 1,000 to 5,000 employees. You know how many of them were unemployed with 54 or 46 reactors offline? Tens of thousands, right? Do you know how many of them volunteered to go to Fukushima? Not a single one. Certainly, not even worldwide. The operator, the degenerate monster corporation, which is on the stock market and was nationalized, of the disease factories, has shut down a reactor which has been leaking since last month because there is a risk the water will spill over the top of the tank where it is being collected. It comes as the operator of Japan's crippled nuclear Fukushima considers dumping water. So I've never heard tell of that story, by the way, of that reactor. That's the first time I heard tell of that, which is unbelievable because I covered this for so many years. It comes as the operator of the degenerate Fukushima nuclear power plant considered dumping water. This is December 2011 story. Like, they didn't stop dumping water. They can't contain the water. You can't contain it. You had multiple lethal nuclear meltdowns. Here's a model from scumbag NOAA, the true degenerates of America, NOAA. They're despicable creatures, aren't they? This is based upon 40 days of radioactive fallout. This model is only based on venting. All the models are based on venting, not actual nuclear meltdowns. If you put the fuel pools into these equations, there's no way to see Earth anywhere. In the first 2 weeks, the whole planet was a constant, and still is, invisible snowstorm of endless radioactive fallout that don't go away for millions of years, and is pulsing energy every second in every direction. Tokyo General Electric Power Company, which is nationalized, which is, of course, the cover story, rather than blame the nuclear industry, is running out of space to store some of the water it treated at the plant due to the inflow of groundwater. This is 2011, they ran out of water, ran out of space. Familiar story? They have no way of storing it, so they said they got to dump it so they don't have to account for storing it. They just make it up. And that is never going to be a solution, what they got done. We have to try to make a stand. Nuclear reactors closed due to leaking water, 2011. Tokyo Degenerate Power Company says it's running out of space to store some of the water it treated. First off, the Siri system, which was supposed to filter cesium, the fabled cesium, never worked. The Arriva system from France, which is the same as the ALP systems, in 2014 never worked, right, for those previous 3 years. And then the ALP system, which didn't work for the previous 3 years in 2014, is confirmed to never have worked. So you're pouring water over melted reactor cores. You're talking about at least 2.2 sieverts per liter that they acknowledge, by the way, of just beta. Apparently the reactors don't produce alphas, gammas, neutrons, and x-rays, just beta. It actually produces all of it, and in copious amounts. And the volume we're talking about is a catastrophic event for the entire planet. Hence the reason we have that poll tonight. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdown and the radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? I showed the documentation from research expeditions at the beginning of the video. And so if you're joining us lately, instead of at the beginning, you can always go back and see that documentation at your leisure. It's also in my playlist on my front page. TEPCO plans to come up with possible ways to handle... Well, first off, TEPCO is not a decommission authority. Why is TEPCO having any say in the matter whatsoever when they should be in jail? And definitely shouldn't be in charge of anything. How can you come up with solutions with a company that knows nothing about it? Presents its proposal to the government non-regulatory body, which was created after the meltdown, for approval. The news prompted protests from university experts and fishing groups. Protests instead of public executions. The government should not and must not approve a plan allowing TEPCO to dispose of the treated water. Treated water. This is 2011, folks. This is another model of the radioactive fallout based on 20 days. Covering the planet was an easy feat. Kenji Sumita, an emeritus professor at which is retired, at the Osaka, which is 600 miles away, university, who specializes in nuclear engineering. So, you know, that's about as honest as a mass murderer. And the reality is that the semi-permanent storage is the only solution available under current technologies and constraints. I haven't met or read about a single nuclear scientist that I wouldn't hesitate to kick the shit out of if I ever come across them. TEPCO may have to find a storage space and look for a technology breakthrough in the coming years that allows it to condense and reduce the volume of tainted water. What do you mean you can't? How do you condense water? Does anybody want to explain that one to me? The emission is a setback for the utility, which appears to be making progress in its cleanup, who don't know nothing about decommissioning. They don't build reactors. How are they supposed to decommission it? Like, the industry is so evil, it thinks it's normal. There's so many generations of inbreeding, they think it's normal to be scum and genocidal, omnicidal machines. No concept. I've never met or heard tell of a single person in the nuclear industry that understands what it is to be a human. Like, if you're new to this topic, I can't possibly over-exaggerate, over-stress how insane this conversation actually is. If we actually had freedom of speech, you'd be surprised what I would be saying right now. Fukushima plant leaks radioactive water. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of zoos on the moon. You see that building over there? How do you contain something in that building to your left? The people to the right are pretending they're 100 feet above the carnage in a fuel pool, above a fuel pool that doesn't even exist. How are you supposed to have a conversation with absurd monsters like that? That's your mainstream media done that to you. All of them. You better get educated. You can't protect yourself by pretending that you're invisible, but pretending that you're immune to radioactive fallout. That's what a moron would do. You better get educated. Do yourself a favor. You can hate me all you want, but you better get yourself educated, and you're not going to get it anywhere else. That's the sickening part of this story. The operator of Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant says at least 45 tons of highly radioactive water has leaked from the facility, possibly into the Pacific, which is downhill from it. Like, the building doesn't exist. Everything is hemorrhaging. There's no such thing as a leak. Everything is a hemorrhage. TEPCO said the workers noticed a leak in a purification device. Okay, so let's bring that up quickly so you can appreciate that lie. That's 2011, right? I only get a little worked up. I don't understand why everybody else is not worked up. I guess I must be a weirdo for giving a shit. I apologize for giving a shit. The whole story is like a horror show, but infinitely worse. Okay, so the Riva system, 2014 August, over 3 years later, 3.5 years later. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused. The ALPS system has yet to function reliably. Well, reliably is period. 2014. So how can they filter water when there's no filtration system? That's just one of the many despicable, disgusting betrayals the nuclear industry has done to you and your loved ones for the last 12 years. TEPCO says groundwater bypass operation has no effect. TEPCO fails to deliver the promise to install a fence to restrict contamination. You can't build a fence to stop radiation. You can't build a filter to filter radiation. You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. How are you going to filter each one of them? You can't. You have to catch everything. You can't filter something that small. The ice wall will not meet expectations. They admit the ice wall will not stop groundwater. There's no bottom in the ice wall. And why would you build an ice wall instead of a real wall? What kind of moron? Whoever said let's build the ice wall should be publicly executed for doing that. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse. Hey, we call it an extinction level event. France says, now France, of course, has never been in control, and they say Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. And I showed you French's model of the radioactive fallout, right? As France was saying that, here's the model that they put out at the same time. 16 days later, that's what the model predicted. And that's only based on venting, not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. Swiss Embassy says evacuate Tokyo, which is 250 kilometers away because Fukushima is uncertain. And they were right. Tokyo has lost almost all control. Not almost. They never had any control. They had no power. They knew it was going to melt down. Everybody in the nuclear industry knew it. Nuclear report warned of an apocalyptic scenario, and they knew when they built it on an active fault line, where there's thousands of earthquakes a year, and you can expect an earthquake anywhere in the next week or so, a massive one. Every year around the anniversary, they have a massive, catastrophic, multi-billion-dollar damaging earthquake right by the reactors. Every fucking year. And don't think this year is going to be any difference. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Which is why we got a poll, and we provided documentation at the beginning of it. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdowns and radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? You know what's interesting about the poll? Is I got 25 people on my stream, and I got almost double that in votes. It's called censorship. Just because you don't see people there, don't mean they're not there. And they're skewing the likes, 34 likes, 47 votes, 25 people on my stream. Nuclear reports warn of an apocalyptic scenario that could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Such a great topic, isn't it? And I've done the research expeditions. Fukushima is an extinction event. That's not a conjecture. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. I went back 6 years in a row, 4 to 5 months at a time. I was assaulted. I've been shot at. I've been demonized and vilified worldwide in the media for being an honest person, for trying to do the moral and ethical thing, for standing up to unbelievable evilness, to being bullied and intimidated and threatened and attacked constantly for years. You know why I'm still here? Because I got no choice. Do you think this is fun? Being censored and attacked and vilified and demonized? You think this is like a lot of fun? Oh boy, I can't wait for tomorrow. Everybody attacks me and ignores me. I'm doing this so you can have a future. Because I sure as fuck don't got one. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. No, it was a genocide. It's an omnicide. It's an extinction event against all the species. He said leaking water contained over 1 million times as much strontium as the maximum safe limit. It's easily absorbed by living tissues. It can't just cause cancer. There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. TEPCO says some of the 45 tons or more of the contaminated water may have reached the Pacific. The big question is, what didn't reach the Pacific and the Atlantic? This is another model from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. Like what is it you need for me to prove to you how deadly and vicious this actually is? Because I can probably bring it up in a matter of minutes. I've been doing this for so long, you'd be shocked at the archive that I've gathered up. I got one of the most amazing archives of documentation in human history. But it's such a complicated subject. You know, I got to walk even the experts through the nuances, the minutiae, the details of the details, because it's a complicated subject, but it's not impossible to learn. It's not even hard to learn. They've made it impossible for you to learn on your own. I can guarantee you that much. But you will learn more than you can imagine in just a couple of these presentations. Look, I can't come across as some jokey, carry-on, silly person, because I'm not, and I never have been like that. This is not a game, and you better get smart, and you better get it together, and you better smarten up and get your act together, because you're only getting one kick at the can, and you better learn what you can. You got to suck it up and learn what you can while you can. It's a bit of a miracle that I'm even here today. And if I don't show up, there's no one to regurgitate the truth and the facts. That's the most disturbing facet of this whole story. Now, I had multiple heart attacks, and it blew out my eyesight, so I got to wear glasses. And people are getting upset because I'm wearing glasses all of a sudden. First off, I'm 60 years old. And I just had 3 heart attacks. That destroyed my eyesight. There's nothing I can do about it. And you're not helping me by making fun of me for wearing glasses. It is also believed the molten cores had eaten part of the way through the cement bases. I could barely contain my contempt on any given second of any given day. So the molten core has eaten part way through the cement bases of buildings that don't exist. That's pretty convenient, you ask me. So they took that building and put a stupid cover on it and then pretended that it looks like the building to the right. That's quite a neat trick, isn't it? The finding indicates the facility came more closer to a cataclysmic meltdown than previously thought. Like, if that's not a meltdown to your left, what the fuck is? I apologize for always being such a pleasant person. I know. You got to appreciate it. It's hard, right, for me not to be totally smiling and happy all the time. It comes natural to me. It really does. It's not that I'm cynical. It's like I hate the fucking guts of everything that's pro-nuclear on the planet. There you go. I said it out loud. Sue me. Last week, TEPCO reported the molten fuel rods at the plant may have eaten 2/3 of the way. TEPCO, who don't build reactors. I don't understand why they weren't all assassinated. I can't wrap my mind around that statement, see? Why weren't they exterminated in the first year? Why didn't Japan take care of their business, take care of their shit? Why did they leave it for us? Now, I'm going to explain to you where the reactors are because that statement right there offends me. May have eaten 2/3 of the way through the cement containment base. This is not very hard to understand. The cement containment base is below where I'm pointing right now. See the pools up there? They're the top of the buildings. You see that building over there? That's one of the buildings we're talking about. There is no burning the fuel rods at the top of the building. They say it went through the base of it. There is no base. There is no building. The only thing left is this little stump of a 190-foot tall building. That's a stump that popped off like a firecracker. And you're going to convince me, and they got people convinced worldwide that they almost had a meltdown and that it stopped after 2/3 of the way through the base of something that don't even exist. And this means something because the radioactive fallout is covering your entire planet. Don't worry. If you suck your thumb hard enough, everything will go away. Now, I mentioned to you earlier a story. Bear with me. I can only screw it up a couple of times before I get it right. So if you hang around long enough, I'll get it right. Many of the 42 entities tossed out the records from the 2011 earthquake. In Iwaki, Miyagi, Fukushima Prefecture threw out the records of what happened after the nuclear meltdowns. But they built a $50 million museum within eyesight of the ongoing multiple reactors, but couldn't find room to store the records, despite the fact the museum is meant to have a record of it. It's so evil it defies any kind of rationale. Miyagi Prefecture said the preservation period has expired, but you're talking about the records of meltdowns that might go on for thousands of years. Oh, too bad. We got to get rid of the records. We got nowhere to put them in our ghost towns. If you're going to try to find something good in the nuclear industry, you meet the definition of stupid. Fukushima fuel rods are eating through the solid cement. This is 2011. Now remember, none of these stories we've ever covered. That's the most batshit statement imaginable when you think about what I've actually covered over the years. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not the only person having a heart attack because of radiation. There was, that's a great point. People remind me in the comments section, I'm not the only one to have heart attacks from radiation. Here, let me show you other people that had heart attacks. You'll probably like this So we got to get a book out to tell the story. There we go, heart attacks. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases in Fukushima. This is 2012. This is a little over a year later. That the deaths were up. There was a spike in a single month of an extra 12,700 people dying of heart attacks compared to any other year in recorded history. A spike in a single month. But it wasn't just heart attacks. There was all kinds of cancer spiking too. Now, the context of me talking about a heart attack was that we're lucky that I'm still here. That's the only context to tell the story. There was people in the hospital with me were having heart attacks at the same time, right? I wasn't the only person. I wasn't trying to employ something like that. When I was talking about, I'm just reinforcing to people how fortunate we are that, I should say, how fortunate I am that I survived the vicious heart attacks, the 3 heart attacks, and they put 7 stents in me. Basically rebuild my pump system. And I'm feeling a lot better, remarkably better. Yesterday, I slept a normal night, and then I didn't sleep at all day yesterday like I normally do. Today, I ended up sleeping for an extra 4 hours. I was up for about 2 hours, and I had to go back to bed. But that's a big improvement from 2 weeks ago, right once I got out of the hospital. But think about Japan, an extra 12,700 people died of heart attacks in a single month. Do you think this only happened a single month? This was every month. Fukushima fuel rods are eating through the solid cement. They barely show you the top of reactor 1. The statement from TEPCO, which is not supposed to exist, is based on a new simulation of the meltdowns, suggesting the fuel inside the number 1 reactor had melted entirely. Let me see if I can find. Because I have a pretty good list. But I have, I'm doing a new one. And sometimes everything gets lost in translation, right? Just bear with me for a minute. Well, number 1 was over 1 million sieverts per hour outside of it. Another thing you might want to remember about this equation, I can't remember what year, 2013, 2011, that some of the reactor cores, which was reactor 1 and 2, went China syndrome, down into the earth, so to speak. Not actual China syndrome, but went down into the earth, hit the water tables. The steam coming out of the ground in 6 places was recorded at 10 sieverts an hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. A short exposure, you'll die in somewhere in the next couple of weeks. 10 sieverts an hour from 6 places. Now, the plume model, that's 40 times the normal speed you're looking at behind me. That's lethal doses wherever it touches. And so they keep having to pave these sites and put down 16 by 8 foot cement or steel sheets. It also believed the molten core is eaten partway through the cement bases number 2 and 3 reactor. Number 2 completely liquefied. And number 3 with kaboom. Show you number 3 and number 2. That's number 3, the stump of number 3. And number 2. Now number 2 burnt continuously for several days. It's the only building that looked like it stayed intact, but you can see at the very top of the page, in the top right-hand corner, That's the heat signature. That's a complete meltdown and melt through and melt out. Indicates the facility came much closer to a cataclysmic meltdown. Of course, the reactor was ejected out of the building. It was rejected out of the building. I got the video there. You want to give me a second? So that's reactor 3 detonating. And the buildings, the white rectangle buildings you see right there, they're 190 feet high. There's the reactor core and the reactor fuel pools falling back down to the earth. This is I zoomed in for you. So if you're watching the plume, eventually you see these big chunks falling back down. That's the reactor core, which was running at the time of that building there. And I'll show you reactor number 1 blowing up because, you know, I can. Anytime you're ready, reactor 1, take it away. That doesn't want to play for some reason. Not much I can do about it. If it doesn't want to play, it doesn't have to. You know the routine. The findings indicate the facility came closer to a meltdown. Again, I'm going to give you a couple of pictures. It's such a confusing story if you're not familiar with it. It's impossible to figure it on your own. So apparently that there is the inside of that building there. Now, how many people thinks that inside of that building at the very top of it, reactor 4 looks like that? So they took reactor 4, they stripped it down to this, they gutted that to your left, and now it magically 100 feet above it looks like that. But it doesn't actually, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Again, you can't go in a building that's a lethal dose. So it's very confusing because the building to your left that you're looking at, or building in the center, let me show you how the scam went. Now, they're pretending people in paper suits are coming from out of a multi-meltdown building. That's what they're trying to pretend right here. This is most likely photoshopped. I don't know why they would do it, but it's a lethal dose in a paper suit to be near the building. So they built this structure off-site, brought it in, and assembled it, and the white panels are laid there by gravity with cranes. They didn't clean up the debris for some reason. That's currently still sitting there because it's lethal doses everywhere. So, but inside of the building, it looks like that. Of course, it doesn't. Now, they've done the same thing with the building on the left as they've done on the right. It's reactor 3 and reactor 4. Arnie Gunnarsson wants you to believe it looks like the building behind him, not the building to your right, which is what it actually looks like. And so does his despicable scumbag wife, who was a spokesperson for the pro-nuclear industry for 2 decades. Rare access inside of the multiple nuclear meltdowns, where he's claiming he's inside Fukushima nuclear meltdown sites. He's inside of buildings that don't even exist anymore. And he's showing you pictures of the destroyed reactor 3, pretending that they're inside of that. He's from ABC, the people who brought us Cecilia Vega. If you go to my video section, not live, but video section, you see a short video of Cecilia Vega pretending she's inside a reactor 4. But when you zoom in on it, and these are extraordinary pictures, you won't see these pictures anywhere else. These were extracted from a single high-quality picture that was released in the 2010, the 10th anniversary rather, 2020. There was a single very high-quality video released, or picture released, and you were able to zoom in on the reactors. And it was really stunning. The buildings actually don't exist anymore. So he's showing you useless pictures and pretending that everything is hunky-dory and that all the water is filtered, and he got some redeeming qualities, that he's the people that he's interviewing are somehow magicians able to take invisible buildings and turn them into... It's just very disappointing, let's put it that way. Fukushima plant reaches cold shutdown, and the date on that is December 2011. Remember, we never covered these stories, ever. The government is hoping the announcement will bring relief, stabilization of the reactors whose molten cores spewed radioactive particles into the air and the sea. And the stable cooling of the reactors and the used fuel pools. Listen, you can't have a cold shutdown of reactors that don't even exist anymore. This reactor doesn't exist anymore. Reactor 3 over there doesn't exist anymore. The fuel pools don't exist. How can you have cold shutdown? What kind of batshit, lunatic craziness is that, right? But that's the point of covering these stories. We show the endless, relentless lies. And listen, the solution is not to pretend this happened, never happened. The solution is not to, like, I can understand in many senses, it's a very scary, morbid story, but you need to get educated. I didn't create it. And I'm not really doing it justice. I can't possibly articulate how incredibly horrific this actually is. I'm giving you a perspective with the documentation that's unassailable. It's completely unassailable information. Right? You can't have reactor cold shutdown in buildings that don't exist. Can you? I don't know sometimes. TEPCO, which is not supposed to exist, they're not a decommissioning authority, did not indicate that all 4 disaster-hit reactors were now safe. I think it's okay to say the reactors basically reached a stable condition of cooling. Well, you can't cool something that don't exist. That's not double talk. That's common sense, I hope. Adding the amount of radiation leaking from the plant is a fraction of what it was in March. Well, March, the buildings detonated. I showed you the video. So it's going to be a fraction of it, but a fraction is still an absurd amount. It's an absurd amount, and it's forever, every day. It's an absurd amount. And I showed you the venting coming out of the ground at 10 sieverts an hour in 6 places. Right? You need the right conditions to see the steam. Just because you can't see it don't mean it's not happening. Because you can't see radiation or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or perceive it. But does that mean it doesn't exist? Does that mean that it's not harmful? It's quite the contrary. Misleading. The director at the Institute for Sustainable Energy Policy's anti-nuclear group said some of the terminology was a little misleading. The term cold shutdown and decommissioning are being used differently from the way they are supposed to be used. After the disaster and exclusion zone around the plant was established, I showed you that the Americans got the models 3 days later. The public got it 9 days later. The model they got was the meltdown version. It was 100% cover-up, and don't give a shit how many millions of people get sick from it. I don't care, don't tell them the truth. They were evacuated to avoid being exposed to high levels of radiation when they weren't. And I already showed you a couple of stories about that from 2011. Water used in the process became a major headache for a corporation. A catastrophic event is nothing more than a headache, which has to release tons of the contaminated liquid into the Pacific, provoking the irk, not the horror, but the irk, a fisherman boat locally and in South Korea and China, but the plumes covered the entire planet. No, the irk. Imagine the contempt, the unbelievable contempt to say something like that. Time for another model. Let me bring up another model. Is this the plutonium? That's the Neptunian. Hang on. We got a plutonium model too. Based on TEPCO's data. So this model here is based on April the 1st. So it's based on 21 days. Of plutonium covering the planet. And they show you a picture of the pump house. Like absurd disenfranchised from reality is what we're used to. And that's not acceptable. You can't have a future by being disenfranchised from reality. Is the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns and the radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? We have a resounding almost 100% yes. Somebody accidentally hit the no by the looks of it, because you got to be radioactive caesium. Whenever you hear the word with an A, caesium with an A, that's British. And the British public relation firms should be spending the rest of their life in purgatory. Found in milk powder. Radioactive, and what was the date on this? Oh, this is Mark Willis from ABC Australia. Man, they were super evil, weren't they? December 2011. Radioactive caesium, believed to have come from the Fukushima nuclear plant, have been found in a brand of Japanese baby formula. 31 becquerels per kilogram. Remember, 11 becquerels a kilogram. Children have holes in their hearts. Has been found in baby formula made by the Menji Corporation, who knew better. While it's below the government's set allowable limits of 200 becquerels per kilogram. Yeah, no, the baby food limit was 10 becquerels a kilogram, not 200 becquerels a kilogram ABC. There are concerns that babies are more susceptible to the harmful effects of radiation. Concern! My goodness. The company suspects a link between the contamination and the meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi disease factories, saying hot air used in the drying process may have contained caesium. The hot air may have contained caesium. I don't know. The cold air and the hot air worldwide contained 1,000 different fission products, not just caesium. Is now recalling 400,000 cans of deadly baby food, which are believed to have been contaminated. Their holdings on the stock exchange plunged 10% on closing. They didn't want to tell the people the baby food, wouldn't want to recall it, because the shareholders would get mad. It's better to poison millions of babies than have the shareholders upset. Worries over the safety of food supplies have shaken the public after the endless radioactive fallout that'll go on for millions of years. The Fukushima plant is the worst nuclear accident in 25 years. No, there's never been, that I know of anyway, Who knows for sure, right? There's never been 4 reactors melting down and 8 fuel pools, each with decades of reactor cores, in history. Like the fuel pools have about 10 times more fuel than the reactor does. The reactors in Japan, each of them were considered 100 times more uranium plutonium, not caesium, but uranium plutonium, than Chernobyl. Fukushima plant spreading radiation over a large swath of northern and eastern Japan, and the entire planet Earth. Nothing but scumbags, right? Nothing but lies. Endless, absurd lies from day one. Cases of excessive radiation in vegetables, tea, milk, seafood, drinking water have stroked anxiety despite assurance from public scumbags that the levels detected are not dangerous. But of course they're incredibly dangerous. These public officials should have been publicly executed immediately for doing that and saying that. And the journalist who wrote it should have been publicly executed for writing the articles. They have no right to exist on your planet. They're the very epitome of no future. Despite assurances from the public scumbags that the levels detected are not dangerous. I'm always a little shocked at how many people are willing to cut your throats for a paycheck. It's stunning. It's stunning. Oh, Dana's back, baby! I'm back! I'm back. I'm the old Dana from 2-3 years ago. I'm coming back stronger every day. I won't be long before I head to Japan and start curb stomping scumbags myself. Woo! Can't wait till I get healthy. Wait till you see me healthy again. Take on my hard case now. Wait till you get a load of me in about 2 months. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Wait till I get a couple of months under the belt. And the old Dana's back. I'm getting there. I feel it in me bones. The strontium 90 anyway. Video worker claims he was ordered into the nuclear meltdowns. Japanese worker tells ABC was deliberately ordered inside wearing paper suits. Oh, we got lots of stories like that. Fukushima workers told to ignore the radiation alerts. That's March 2013. Oh no, the beeping, don't worry about beeping. Well, from TEPCO, we would not lie to you. Just a few days before the second anniversary of the crisis, a picture is emerging of what workers endured at the disease factory known as Fukushima. Calling it crippled, anybody that calls the nuclear meltdowns crippled should be crippled. In an exclusive interview with ABC, the man also said 2 of his ill-equipped colleagues suffered beta ray burns. They had to wade through radioactive water. Not just beta, it's gamma, alpha, neutrons, X-rays. It's a little shocking whenever you hear their version of it. Just a few days before the second anniversary. Let me keep going. He got 17 years of being a nuclear scumbag. 10 days after the tsunami triggering meltdowns in 3 reactors. They got to do that every single time. The tsunami done it. It doesn't matter how it happened. It happened. It's despicable when they do that. 5 of his colleagues were ordered into the plant. Well, everybody ran away. There was only a handful that were stupid enough to stay behind. Wearing raincoats, face masks, and radiation readers, The workers had to cut their way into the damaged turbine buildings. Well, the turbine buildings are not the reactors. And this is not true, by the way. The reactors were melted down in front of your eyes. Why would you cut your way into the radiated turbine buildings? And the top of the turbine buildings were punctured by fuel assemblies that were ejected from the fuel pools. There's zero possibility anybody went into the turbine buildings. And in my playlist, you'll see 1,900 pictures of Fukushima released by TEPCO. I went through every picture. There were 6 videos to tell the story. And I guarantee you nobody was inside the turbine buildings. To get power, and no one's in there today, right? They dropped cellulite 50-pound bags through the roof of it. And they're at several sieverts per hour each, which means there's a lethal dose. You can't go in there and come out and tell the story after. And to say they suffered beta ray burns through their feet and their legs, like you're getting gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bursts. It's not beta ray per se, right? It's going to be a little bit of everything going on. It's not just beta coming out of the reactors, for goodness sakes. And the radiation readers must be broken, said TEPCO. 3 of the team were exposed to 180 millisieverts of radiation. Listen, there was over 1 million sieverts. 1 million, which is 1 billion millisieverts outside of reactor 1. But no, they went into the nuclear meltdown zone and were only exposed to 180 millisieverts, 4 times the annual safe limit. Like people who write like that should have their arms chopped off. He says conditions were poor. He had a 5-year-old son at home. Every time he returned home, he'd strip off his radioactive clothing, take a bath immediately so he didn't bring the radiation into the home and family. Well, you got to throw your clothes away. You got to shave your head too right away. Like if you go into the nuclear wasteland, the first thing you got to do is shave your head when you get out of there and throw away everything you had with you. Some have had the danger pay because you put that stuff in your laundry, you're going to contaminate everything in your laundry. Some of them had their danger pay ripped off by the subcontractors. Well, that ain't nuclear scientists we're talking about. That's the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language, not TEPCO employees. Others have been dumped and left without any work. Well, I thought they worked for TEPCO for 17 years. Like, you can't have it both ways. One thing we learned is if it's from any mainstream media, it's just pure lies. Cancer risk is higher in worse hit Fukushima area. But there's heart problems in liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia. There's endless 1,800 diseases to worry about besides cancer. 2013, the brainwashing was in second gear, forcing 180,000 people to flee their homes. It was 400 and it was almost 500,000 people. Within the first 2 years, he whittled it down to 180,000. They can't seem to open their fucking mouth without lying, is one thing we know for sure. In a statement, the World Health Organization, the disgusting, despicable, hateful scum World Health Organization, Director for Public Health and Environmental Dr. Maria Nara said the disaster brought with it a higher risk of cancer. These people are scum. They're subsidy companies of the military-industrial complex, also known as United Scumbag Nations. A blight on humanity is what United Nations actually is. A breakdown of data based on age, gender, and proximity to the plant shows a higher cancer rate for those located in the most contaminated parts. Oh, and every other part of the planet Earth. So this model is based on 19.5 days of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. That's the Atlantic Ocean where I'm pointing, for goodness sakes. Like the studies out of Ottawa, Canada, was 220 million atoms of iodine-131 per liter of rainfall sustained for weeks. And it's got a 15 million year half-life. In the most contaminated areas, the degenerate, disgusting, despicable World Health Organization estimated there was a 70% higher risk of females exposed as infants developing thyroid cancers over their lifetimes. There's 1,800 diseases, not just thyroid cancer. Whenever you hear World Health or United Nations or IAEA or UNSCLEAR or IRPA or the like, their job is to cover it up. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not misrepresenting it. They're the opposite of what a human is. Yeah, another one of them nights. How do you not get upset? How can you tell this story and not be upset? How does that actually work? But the degenerate World Health Organization said the risks were relative and remained small. Like, that's so offensive. That's so absurdly offensive for the disgusting whack job World Health Organization. It remains small except for in Japan. The death rates might give the creeps to some people, but no, the health rates are small, Dana. In just 1 month, there's almost an extra 13,000 deaths by heart attacks. But don't worry, Dana. The health risks are small, Dana. Mom, Dana's fear-mongering. 7 people died on a single street, on a single shopping street in Fukushima. That was Koriyama City, by the way, which we cover quite a bit. It wasn't evacuated. It was, I believe, it was 300,000 people there. Yay. What else we got here? Yeah, whenever you look at the story and you're honest, it's really something. Bear with me. I don't have any tolerance whatsoever for nuclear industry. Zero. Zilch tolerance. There was a American presidential candidate a couple of years ago. When I was out on a research expedition, I had pulled into Bella Bella, I think it was, and I got this phone call. He was a presidential candidate in the United States. He said if he got elected, he was going to put me in charge of the nuclear. And of course, you know what that meant, right? He asked me would I take the job. I said, yes, of course I would. I said, but you realize I'm not going to go nice. I'm not going to be very nice about what I'm doing. He said, no, that's why I want you, Dana. He said, you're very honest. I said, you have no idea, man. You really don't. He said, no, I do. let me try to rationalize the madness of what we're actually talking about. And the government is insane what they're doing. Let me show you what they're doing with the incinerators. just to give you a quick eye-opener on how batshit lunatic. And I'm only doing this because of what the United Nations has said. Here we go. Almost ready. You can't possibly get any evil in this industry. Debris from Fukushima nuclear plant is being ground up and burned in other parts of Japan. Now, this is a response to the World Health Organization saying the risk remains small. Disposal of quake debris begins in Tokyo to be burned in Kyoto. Radiation of fears will continue for years. Over 1 billion pounds of radioactive material to be burned, ground up, taken out of prefectures and burned. They found plutonium in every sample. The garbage was too radioactive to get rid of. The ash is too radioactive to get rid of. Is the government trying to contaminate every region in Japan by burning radioactive debris? Incinerating radioactive material can contaminate the environment. Not could, but does. Incinerators run around the clock. The sewage plants, the sewage was too radioactive to get rid of. The water from the water reclamation filtration facilities is too radioactive to get rid of. The ash from the incinerators is too radioactive to get rid of. And they're dumping it directly into the ocean. Tokyo was overloaded with radioactive fallout. Tokyo official blasted the parents who wanted the kids. In fact, he didn't let the kids go out for the first year and a half, only to go to school. Think about that statement. No, everything's fine, but the kids can't go out. Surge in radioactive caesium levels caused incinerators near Tokyo to shut down. Tokyo's neighbor, caesium is 70,000 becquerels a kilogram. So imagine how much is liberated into the environment. They're burning 100,000 becquerels a kilogram with 1 billion pounds of debris, radioactive debris. So when you see these 1-ton bags, the minimum number is 100,000 becquerels a kilogram before it goes into the 1-ton bags. It's not microsieverts or millisieverts. It's becquerels. 1 million plus becquerels a kilogram of caesium all over Minnesota, where they currently have multiple farms hemorrhaging food into the environment. Over 1 million becquerels a kilogram of radioactive caesium from mysterious black dust in Minnesota City. 10 million becquerels a kilogram. You got to multiply that by 64 to get a square meter. I'm only laughing because it's better than me screaming, right? 10 million becquerels times 64 per square meter in major farming, ongoing farmland. Like, the industry is insane. It's actually insane. Radiation dose is 50 times higher than the total of the other 3 plutonium isotopes that were mentioned. But the World Health Organization is like, no, nothing to worry about. Everything is good. We're the World Health Organization. We wouldn't lie to you and stab you in the back at all. That's what they do for a living, by the way, is lie and stab you in the back. Extreme increase of mortality caused by cardiac diseases. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. Really? You don't think the death rate's not going to give the creeps to everybody? You're talking about an extra 13,000 heart attacks in a single month. Does anybody really think that only happened for 1 month? According to the World Health Organization, not even a fly had a hair hurt on their nuts. Cancer risks are higher the worst hit Fukushima. Like, every time I hear something like that, I just want to go grab one of these baby murderers and shake the shit out of them until he can't speak ever again. Editor note, a quote from the World Health Organization report has been added to the article to give context to the analysts of cancer risk to people living near the disease factories. So the World Health Organization seen the article and got hold of them and said, hey, put a quote in there saying that it's small from us. You tell me that's not evil? You tell me that's not the ultimate in degenerate actions? Do you got any concept of how evil you actually got to be to take that job? It makes anybody in the jail look like a schoolyard bully compared to what these monsters are actually like. They're the opposite of what a human would be. Let's keep it rolling. We're getting there. Residents got to pay back Fukushima compensation. I'm not going to take it on Esther because I'll start screaming. That's so awesome. Gangster accused of cashing in on Fukushima disaster. Gangsters. It's hard to be any more gangster than UN, World Health Organization, IAEA. They're the real gangsters. The Yakuzas are just like little puppies compared to these disgusting parasites. They took all the homeless and then stole the money that they were supposed to get. The average pay was less than $11 an hour to work at lethal doses. And the World Health Organization set those wages. Fukushima workers told a lie about radiation exposure. Now, we've covered endless stories about that. The idea was to cover a bunch of stories I've never covered before. And a Japanese subcontractor working for the disaster Fukushima nuclear plant scumbags, TEPCO, has admitted it asked workers to lie about the radiation exposure. It didn't ask them, it beat the shit out of them and stole their wages on top of that, and then told them to pick up their check in 2 weeks, knowing they would be dead before those 2 weeks were up. Nuclear operator released secret Fukushima tapes. That's another disturbing story, by the way. Former Prime Minister Nato Khan, who was in office during the meltdowns, told ABC believes the plant's operators had been hiding key evidence. Well, no, the evidence is fact. They were hiding it. For months, TEPCO had resisted pressure to release critical recordings, arguing that they had in-house material, and to release them would compromise the privacy of those on the tapes. So they poisoned the entire planet, killed the Pacific and Atlantic and the oceans, and no one's allowed to double check what they were saying. That's not a little bit convenient, is it? We compromised the privacy of those monsters on the tapes, the criminals. TEPCO executives purposely delayed pumping seawater into the damaged reactors because of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. Did I mention we got a poll tonight? I put the explanation at the beginning of the show with the documentation. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdown and radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? And that's exactly what it is. I put the evidence at the beginning of the show. It's incontestable. It's unassailable. The tapes will provide. They did this because they knew pumping in salt water would force them to decommission the reactors. So that's the lie. They're sticking to it. So let me see if I got this right. I worry about humanity sometimes, but when I'm doing this, I worry about it all the time. How can we have a future with this many scumbags? So here's what the reactors looked like originally coming up. So they didn't pump seawater in because they were afraid they have to decommission these reactors. Now, does anybody think the reactors were ever going to work again? You're looking at reactor 3 on the right, reactor 4 to your left. Is there anybody on the entire planet that thinks that these reactors were going to work if you didn't put salt water in them? Here's reactor 3 the next year. Does anybody think that there's anything there that's going to work? Even a light switch? Another mystery the recordings could help solve is who is telling the truth about TEPCO's handling of the crisis, specifically whether the company wanted to withdraw its workers from this. Of course they did. Klan had described the missing audio of his speech as extremely strange because they're a common asset of the Japanese people and not a private company like TEPCO to hide. The speech was filmed and broadcast to all TEPCO sites, so surely they recorded the sound at one of those sites. It would appear the company is trying to hide something inconvenient. The revelation comes as tens of thousands of people rally in Tokyo to demand an end to the disease factors known as nuclear power. Ex-Prime Minister revealed meltdowns almost crippled Japan. In 2012, a year on from the meltdowns, Japan's Prime Minister at the time told ABC that the disaster had come close to crippling the nation with the evacuation of tens of millions of people from Tokyo. Well, they didn't evacuate Tokyo, they said, because that never happened. That's the official story. They didn't evacuate Tokyo because reactor 3 and 4, they said, didn't melt down, despite the fact that reactors 3 and 4 melted down. Not a little ways, but completely, and the fuel pools are all gone. But if they had melted down, they would have had to evacuate Tokyo. So guess what? They're supposed to evacuate Tokyo. Oh, and guess what else? They're supposed to evacuate Japan. And that's ABC. Here's Cecilia Vega from ABC.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this.
Now she's pretending she's in the building to the right that don't even exist. She's currently a correspondent for the White House. She makes $1 million a year being a piece of shit and a monster and a mass murderer. She if you see her, she looks like a normal everyday human, but she has none of those attributes whatsoever. Not a single one. She's the opposite of a human. She's a real life monster, a real life despicable demon. And the list just keeps going on and on and on. It's really something. The fear radiation plume could spread all the way to Tokyo. And if it had, they would have to evacuate 38 million people. Okay, hang on. Oh, what's going on? Hang on, we'll get there. I'm just waiting for a folder to show up magically. There we go. Oh, that's not quite what I was looking for. Hang on. Yeah, they were going to move a backup city from Tokyo 300 miles west. Tokyo had huge numbers. In 2013, the fog was 4,000 becquerels a kilogram. You should never live in an environment with something like that. 40 millisieverts, 40,000 microsieverts per hour at a supermarket. These are absurd numbers. That kind of caught up to me tonight for some reason. I guess we'll call it a night, I suppose. I'm not feeling very good here. Oh well, we made it pretty far. Not all the way through it. TEPCO director quit with a golden parachute 2012. Can't remember, it was 100 million or something. He was the guy in charge of the plants when they melted down. Evil is the only way to become rich, apparently. In the nuclear industry, apparently, I should say. A Japanese nuclear worker tells ABC was deliberately ordered into the radioactive buildings. Yeah, we'll just hit the headlines of a couple. We'll call it quits. 2 former prime ministers take anti-nuclear stances. 2014. Never mind. This was I ended that one. But he's going to open a brewery in Nami using the local rice in the no-go zone. So there's an absurd amount of real-life idiots on the planet that ultimately will end up murdering endless millions of people because the government will throw them a few dollars to go do something stupid, and they're so stupid they don't know the difference. I'm going to close down the poll tonight. Is the Fukushima nuclear meltdown and radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? We got almost 60 votes and less than 30 people on the show. And you can only vote once. So how does that work, I wonder? Philip Lent donated $40 and Stephen Young donated $50 today. And very grateful that anybody donated. Thank you so much. It's a very humbling thing for me. And it's necessary to tell the story, unfortunately. We got to keep raising money. I can't do it on my pension on my own, right? So we're going to end the poll. 58 votes. Is Fukushima nuclear meltdown and radioactive fallout worldwide an extinction level event? We got almost 100% of yes votes. I showed all the evidence at the beginning. If you're not familiar, you can go back after or when you convenient. And yeah, good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hope everybody has a great night. Great great day tomorrow. And I see James sent a PayPal. My goodness, thank you, James. You're awesome. Excellent timing. Angels Place, Blue Jay. And I apologize, everybody. I haven't done a shout out since I got out of the hospital. I'm sick to my guts right now, so I'm not going to do one tonight either. But I think it's just where I'm a little overheated here tonight. I've been doing really good. Like, I'm doing really good compared to the last couple of years because we had 7 stints put in, right? That's an extraordinary number. And so I'm breathing really good. I'm feeling good. But I'm not taking a chance and doing anything. I'm just sleeping and resting and working. And so in another 3 or 4 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time, it'll be a lot warmer on top of that. We're in a freezing cold. But in another month or two, it'll be safe for me to go out and do things. I can't wait. I can't wait to start getting out and doing some exercise, some little walks and stuff like that. But I'm going to play it safe for at least another 3, 4, 5 weeks. Make sure I heal up really good. And then we're going to curb stomp the nuclear industry. So this week is the anniversary week. Next Sunday is the 12th anniversary. And so this week I'm just going to do a whole lot of Fukushima anniversary, 12th anniversary videos. And cover a whole different bunch of facets of Fukushima. And I'm really privileged. I feel real privileged to tell the story and to try to bring context to such a complicated subject. And there's 9,000 facets to the nuclear industry, and we've delved into all of them, right? And so we have a very impressive knowledge, but it's such a complicated subject. It's not like I give people the information, they can figure it out on their own, right? There's so much misleading, deceitful and deceptive and dishonest things about the nuclear industry. It's easy to get sucked into the black void and not be able to comprehend the enormity, the vicious danger we're all in. And we are in real danger. This is not an opinion. This is backed up by documentation. So tomorrow night, we'll hopefully be back tomorrow night. I'm just going to mark my spot with these little pictures right here so I can find it tomorrow. Okay, we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. If I don't show up tomorrow night, I most likely will. But if I don't show up tomorrow night, I'll show up the night after, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure I'll be here tomorrow night, but I'm still not healed up, right? So I can never say 100%. So, excuse me for my discretions. We never know. As it stands, I'm planning on being here tomorrow night. I hate missing a day off. And it's one of the few pleasures I have is coming out and curb stomping the nuclear industry. Can't deny me that simple pleasure. Have a great night. You've made it this far. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us little and hopefully goes a long way. Take care, folks.